Okay, I'm live. Got everything set up just in time for this live stream. I'm going to do the normal thing there and just give people a few minutes to get the notification. Tomorrow's a big day, folks, for the Alberta people. Big day indeed. Oh, that's the thing when it comes to politics. Usually, it's not a big fan of politics, but I got to tell you, this at this stage of the game in our democracies, yeah, every little bit kind of matters in terms of affecting the culture and whether it's going more towards authoritarianism, top down central planning, or finally, or at least in some semblance, going in the opposite direction towards respecting individual freedom and sovereignty, and just the live let live mentality, which used to be a normal thing. That's the thing with this talk all the time by these central planners about new normals. Like, yeah, I don't want anything to do with this new normal where central planning, top down dictates authoritarianism, right? Collectivism is how our days unfold, right? No, that's not the way to go, folks. I mean, for some people, for sure, right? Some people are definitely going to take great advantage and benefit themselves tremendously at everyone else's expense. But Canadians should be wise enough to realize that just because you think your team, whether it's Team Trudeau or Team Notley, right, or Team Jagme, whatever your team, whatever your gang of choice is, to believe that these people have your best interests in mind. That's no. Like, and of course they'll espouse all kinds of rhetoric, but really at the end of the day, what really should matter to you is not the rhetoric or the platitudes or the bullshit that they espouse that comes from their mouth to try to, get you on board. Really, it should really at the end of the day is, do the policies that you're putting forth, is it going to make me more free or less free? That's really at the end of the day is, forget about the left right thing, is, are your policies, and not just me, right, going to allow me to have my freedom and even maybe my neighbor that I completely disagree with? Because that's really at the end of the day, if you still want to be able to have cordial relationships or be friendly with your neighbor, the only way that can work is if you're both willing to, put down the big gigantic gun in the room, AKA in government, and stop trying to, point it at each other all the time, because it really makes it difficult, right, to be friendly and neighborly when that's the case. So, like I say, freedom, liberty has to be at the core. And I got to tell you, folks, for me in particular, and I mean, I got no skin in the game per se, other than the fact, and by forced association in this big country, Canada, actually what the Alberta people do and what they choose actually will have an effect on me for sure. But I got to say, if I was in Alberta and I was heading, not that I'm a big fan of elections, right? I mean, technically, I could maintain my principles and just say, yeah, I ain't dealing with the election process or whatsoever. But if that also means, right, the principled individuals and libertarians, if it means we continually sit on the sidelines, and I get it, there's pure and real justification for doing so, right? I get that. I understand. I learned that stuff years ago. But if it also means, if the actual end result means that, a socialist or a collectivist like Rachel Notley, right, who wants to take away even more freedoms than her and her ilk did when she was already in power the last time, which is unforgettable to the Albertan people in particular. If you sitting on the sideline allows her and her ilk, the collectivists, to gain power, well, I mean, you can say you took the principled position, and some part of me would kind of admire that, right? But at the same time, it's like, well, you're still someone that sat on the sidelines and watched things unfold when you may, right? And I know this is a difficult premise to put forward. I get it. Having the difficult even trying to put all this stuff together in my own head, because once again, I'm typically apolitical. Typically, I don't want nothing to do with voting for rulers. But like I said, every time you think in the real world that we libertarians are people that are principled, I won't enter into the fray. Well, okay, well, look what's happening, right? That's the thing. We have to deal with the practical reality on the ground. And that's to suggest, well, then your opponents, you're just giving them a freebie. Here you go, you can win, right? Now, I get it in the long term, right? But once again, you can change that culture showing up and checking a box once every few years, first of all, that should not be the way you gain your freedoms. And it really is. But you can still work at changing and affecting your culture while even taking that one small chance, that one small opportunity to do what you can to at least maintain, right? Even if you're not going to gain any extra freedoms, well, at least try to maintain the ones that are already in existence. Anyways, like I say, just give me a second. I'm going to, before I even get to the whole Alberta election, I got a whole bunch of stuff that I had lined up here, and I just kind of want to go through them real quick here. Or actually, no, we'll save it for another time. Actually, I'm going to stick with the topic at hand, which is the Alberta election. And I was actually even curious, with me being on the East Coast. Well, this is 1 o'clock right now, Atlantic time. So what would that be in Alberta? 10, right? I believe 10 o'clock in the morning. I'm not sure how many people are going to get the opportunity to see this video as it's being streamed live. Heck, there's probably lots of people out there right now, even in coffee shops or pubs or, I don't know, whatever. Sunday, church, right? Could even be at church right now. So who's to say if I'm going to get that many people? But like I said, I thought this was something that was important enough that I should cover it. Because like I say, liberty, if it's to mean anything, is keeping the authoritarians at bay as best you can, And once again, there is no one thing that you can do. There's a myriad of things. And if one of those things can be supporting Daniel Smith and the UCP, right? So at the very least, I mean, I would love to say, go vote for the Libertarian Party of Canada. I would love to tell you that. And you would be making a principled choice. But what would it do in reality? How would that unfold in reality in Alberta? Well, you're definitely not going to get the majority, the mob, or even the plurality of your fellow Albertans to do so, right? As you see, even with the polling, and not to suggest that you need to trust polling, but it seems like everyone, even some of those other fringe parties, they're basically showing like 1% support, because really what it's coming down to today, and that's because people have been trained to think in this binary terms, in terms of left versus right. And that's what's on offer right now in Alberta, right? Not true liberty per se. Once again, even I seen Daniel Smith is out there, and I get the practicality of it. And I hope at some point in time we get away from this, but the practicality of it is she's out there doing the same kind of thing that the NDP or even if the Liberals were out there or had any kind of substance or force in Alberta is, here, let me offer you freebies just before election time, right? And even I'll admit, I've seen Daniel Smith out there, pandering to not just the base, but Albertans in particular, or in general, to garner their support. And first of all, I think that's just terrible anyways, the fact that you have to keep offering. Well, first of all, the state plunders people, and it's like, here, I'll give you a little portion of that back if you vote for me. It's like, I would highly recommend and suggest that maybe the best thing you can do is just vote for people that aren't going to plunder your wealth. But because of the world we live in and the current state of things, well, I get it. I get it, because if she took the same kind of principle stance, but you see how this destroys principles, right? So even someone like Daniel Smith, who if she genuinely has those libertarian credentials, I mean, the policy or the platform should be much, much, much more liberty oriented than it is now, right? With much less privileges or perks offered to the plebs, right? Vote for me and I'll give you X, Y, or Z, right? I wish that were not the case, but once again, we have to be realistic. We have to deal with the real world that we live in. And the real world is, well, Rachel Notley was willing to, plunder the economic prosperity of the producers, right? The ones that are generating the wealth and income. And she was willing to offer that to all kinds of people, right? That forced wealth redistribution model, all the people that are the recipients of it, oh, they love it. Not so much for the people who are plundered, right? This is the problem. But once again, we have to acknowledge this is the way it's going to unfold. This is the way this election is going to unfold. And like I say, people will have their single issues for sure. for sure there's going to be a sizable percentage of the Albertan electorate or the people who are going to choose, go to the voting booth and choose who's going to be their next ruler, right? Their next leader, whatever. But there will be some who will be just, hey, is it going to benefit, me because I work in the energy fields like oil and gas, right? And I can surely I can understand that. But once again, this is why politics continues to be, as far as I'm concerned, this race to the bottom. And we're not anywhere near getting to the point where our culture is moving or gravitating away from that race to the bottom. So once again, it's a tough game to play. I don't envy anyone that's delving into politics these days, that's for sure. But at the very least, folks, like I say, if you're an Albertan, you need to talk, not just yourself, and don't rest on that. That's the other thing. I know the CBC ran an article basically, with their own poll saying that the UCP is going to win. Well, the CBC is not doing that because they like the UCP or Daniel Smith, which we know, right? The overwhelming majority of the people who are contributors to the CBC or are actively employed at the CBC loathe people such as Daniel Smith, right? But they do that is to try to amp up the base of support who's against the UCP and Daniel Smith, the Notley crowd, the socialist types, the ones that the CBC types, right, align with ideologically. So what they're saying is, hey, it looks like the UCP is going to win. So, hey, if you don't want that to happen, you better get out there and vote. Well, I'm going to tell you, as a Canadian with, like I say, not a real lot of skin in the game because it's not an election in my particular backyard, but I got to tell you, don't rest on your laurels. Don't rest on the fact that you think, there'll be enough UCP people or there'll be enough Albertas that are disenfranchised or sick and tired of top-down authoritarianism. They'll show up to vote, so they don't need me. I can just sit home today and do, nah. Get an ass to the election, to the polling station, and get some other people that make it a family gathering if you want, but do something. Like I say, don't rest on your laurels. Don't rely on others, right? Step up, take that responsibility, get up there and do what you got to do. To support, at least for me in particular, from a casual observer, the one candidate that's running between the two that, like I say, will at least move the needle in the direction in the general vicinity where it's at least headed in the direction of more freedoms and liberty, right? That's what I would suggest. Anyways, I see there's a few comments in here already. Let me just check out a few. Hey, Saniko, what's going on, my friend? Enjoying the shit show that is Alberta politics. Yeah, it's quite the shit show, all right. I'm just, boy, I hope I'm not, me and you and everyone else, I hope, or anyone that at least sees things along the same lines I do is, I just hope by tomorrow morning, tomorrow evening. I guess the results will probably come out on Tuesday, as best I can figure. But yeah, if Notley gets in, boy, that's that could just be so bad. Could be just not good. I vote libertarian or separatist parties or independents with good values. Well, listen, I get you, Saniko, and like I said, making that principled stance, I can't hate on you for doing so. That's for sure. But you, at the very least, know that it'll make you feel good, and maybe you'll even sleep better tonight. But it's not going to change the outcome. Like, it actually, this is the thing, right? People who would typically maybe choose one side or the other, which not suggesting that you should you stick to whatever you want to do. But I'm just saying, that deep down inside that the Libertarian Party is not going to be elected. You know that, right? So I don't know. To me, I get it, but I just hope be honest with you, I hope not a whole lot of folks are taking making the same choice. And this is coming from a libertarian, right? So not that I'm against voting for the Libertarian Party, but I just got to tell you, I don't know. It's a tough one. Smith is the lesser of two big evils. I get you. I'm completely on board with you. Right. You'll get no ringing endorsement for me for any politician, to be honest with you. I mean, except for maybe someone like Ron Paul because of his unbridled history of just being a staunch advocate of liberty no matter what, right? The man's got a record that speaks for itself. So, and I get it. I get it. I don't know Daniel Smith well enough, don't know her history or background well enough to be able to make that kind of statement. But there, yeah, I get it. Very few people, that enter into politics that I actually trust even the slightest. So I'm with you. Totally get it. Totally get it. I have two good people in my writing that I have to choose from. Kathy Flett, who the local paper calls radical extremist views of less tax, less government, and less government-run services. Oh, so is Kathy Flett must be the running for the Libertarian Party? Well, like I say, I feel so bad for the people who do run under like the banner of the Libertarian parties, whether you're talking about Canada, the US, because they put a lot of work and effort in, and they definitely got the right stance. They've got the proper principles, the policy, the platform. I get it, but I also have to acknowledge that we're a pretty small, tiny minority in terms of the people who are willing to take that principled stance and vote for liberty-oriented or libertarian-oriented candidates, right? That's the reality, right? I hope, and I pray that someday the culture of our country, not just in Alberta, but in other jurisdictions and provinces in this country, that it would be conducive, right, to where a libertarian party or a libertarian candidate could, garner the majority or the plurality of the votes in their jurisdiction. I hope and pray that someday that does come to fruition, and I'm going to keep fighting for it as long as I possibly can. But once again, I have to be pragmatic. I have to be a realist, right? I cannot live in a utopian mindset. It's easy to do that, but me personally, I know we're not there yet. I know the culture of Alberta is not there. So I would highly expect, and I think I'll be proven correct, that the Libertarian Party of Canada is going to get a very, 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 very tiny amount of votes. That is the one thing I am sure of. But once again, not hating on you. I get what you're saying. I just, like I said, I like to talk about these things, clarity of language, clarity of discussion. It gives clarity of mind so that we're all at least dealing with things from the practical, like I said, realistic standpoint rather than idealistic, right? We have close to record early voting so far, which is good. Well, that is good. That is good. Or at least it seems like. It seems like. Accelerationism. Well, that's the other thing too. Is I guess there's people. I have actually heard people make the argument. Well, everyone should vote in the NDP, so they really destroy everything, and then it'll show how bad things are. But that's the thing. Like I don't know. Even with the idea of the broken window fallacy, right? Technically you can, right? At least people who are window installers or builders, right? It can benefit them, but then that also means you had to smash a whole lot of stuff. I don't know. I've never been a big fan of smashing things to build. Not when you don't have to, not when it's not absolutely necessary, right? We technically don't have a Libertarian Party in Alberta, which is kind of funny. Yeah, that is weird, isn't it? That is quite strange because Alberta seems to be the province that at least looks like it's probably the more libertarian leaning province in the country. So that is a strange thing. It's a bit of a strange thing, isn't it? Right. But that's the thing. Just like within the US, I guess Alberta, the libertarians, well, they're just, I guess, considered part of that big tent of Team Blue, right? Team Conservative, which is why I guess a lot of parties, even conservatives in the past, called themselves progressives because I guess they thought they could appeal to, but that's the thing. That's the thing. It is really tough, right? It is really tough because if your principles don't align and your policies, your platform are based on your principles, and that's the thing. You're constantly asking people to yield their principles. And as more and more people do that, well, that's kind of why we end up in the current situation we're in now. So listen, I can make an argument for both sides that I'm both with you and against you at the same time. It's a tough one, folks. It's a tough one. Oh, okay. She's an independent. Right on. Right on. Well, this is the other thing too. I would even be, see, this is another example. If you had something along the lines of proportional representation, then, and under that scenario, I would actually suggest that voting for the Libertarian Party of Canada, especially in like select ridings, I think that would be genius, right? If you had proportional representation, because that could mean that you could get some lone individual or even a couple voices that are saying the kind of things that you know that needs to be said and that Albertans and Canadians really desperately need to hear. But that's the thing. Our electoral system or our election system and the way it's set up in Canada's parliamentary democracy, it's the first past the post type of system. It's whoever wins like the majority of the plurality, they get it all, right? So this is the problem. And once again, it's not going away anytime soon until, or at the very least, there is a change. But I mean, think about what it would be required at this point to even change like the electoral process and how it plays out, right? To get proportional representation. I mean, Trudeau tried to suggest, right? That was part of his one of his many broken promises back in when he was running for prime minister in 2015 is this will be the last first past the post system. Well, as soon as you get in there and realize that, well, wait a minute, if we have anything even remotely representing proportional representation or something along those lines, well, that could mean people like, Bennett or Tim Moen or, well, I haven't really delved into politics per se or never been a candidate or a member, yes, but a candidate for a political party. But, anyone is an actual principled libertarian. Under that scenario, like I say, you could get them a seat, right? At the big table, right? So they could say what they had to say. And that would be a beautiful spectacle. Oh, I would love to be able to see that. But once again, that's not what's going to happen or take place. What's going to happen and take place is people are either going to choose to put Notley in power or Daniel Smith. And like I say, definitely, lesser of the evils, for sure. But like I say, it is what it is. Yeah, I've heard that too. Smith considers herself a libertarian conservative. I get this. Yeah, I've heard that too. And I believe you're actually absolutely correct in that assertion. Well, like I say, I was going to go quickly cover, well, here's one thing. I'll just say this comes from Press Progress. Wonder if I should bring this right up, actually. Yeah, let's bring this up. Of course, depending on who you are, right? Whether this appeals to you or not will be up in air. But I did see this out of Press Progress, which I believe is a left-leaning outlet, right? Daniel Smith suggested police officers could face criminal charges for enforcing public health orders. 2 weeks before becoming Premier of Alberta, Daniel Smith floated the idea that RCMP officers broke the law by enforcing Public Health Act. Well, she's not wrong. What's supposed to be the supreme law of the land in Canada? Doesn't take long to, hey, just go look up the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Read the very top part of it. Yeah. God and the supremacy of God and the rule of law, right? Which is laid out in the Charter. That is the supreme law. The supreme law of the land is the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Or at least that's the pretense. That's the suggestion, right? So, yes, if anyone, regardless of what you call them, police officer, politician, healthcare worker, right? Security guard, whatever, who they are, if they infringe on mine or anyone else's inherent and inalienable rights and freedoms, right? It doesn't matter who gave them the orders. That's another thing. Like, come on. Just following orders, like that's just a terrible excuse anyway. So yes, I agree with her 100%. If you, just because some authoritarian said, oh yeah, you can go fuck people up now because I said so by my edict and you did it, yeah, you should have to suffer the consequences for what you've done. So completely on board with what she said. Of course, there'd be some people who would be completely against that, obviously. Mainly the tyrants. This is by Luc Lebrun, May 14th, 2023. Alberta UCP leader Daniel Smith suggested criminal charges could be laid against police officers for enforcing the Public Health Act, citing pseudo-legal arguments claiming the criminal code shields places of worship from law enforcement. That's not exactly what shields places of worship from law enforcement. No. I'm quite certain she didn't say, what? Are you suggesting that she's saying, oh, you could go in, you could kill people, rape people, rob them and all, and because you're in a church, oh, you don't have to follow the law? Is that what this person is trying to suggest? No. So already big straw man already, right? Before her whirlwind. And that's the other thing. If this person's from Press Progress, if it's a lefty, can you imagine the lefties that are reading this? Oh, so what is it, right? Even if you're a progressive lefty these days, it's like, well, do your thought leaders support freedom or the state and the enforcers? Because I've got to tell you, people on the left, right, have a really, really difficult relationship with the mindless order followers out there. Right? So it's got to be difficult for the progressives to constantly be talking out both sides of the mouth on a regular basis these days, and continue to do so, because hopefully fewer and fewer people will continue to show solidarity or support with the progressives, right? Or as I call them, regressives. Before her whirlwind rise to Premier of Alberta, Smith was a vocal critic of vaccines and public health measures. Vocal critic of vaccines, you say? Or was it a vocal critic of vaccine mandates? Right? Yeah, I think the latter is probably more appropriate. But once again, just bullshit after bullshit. Well, that's what the left, that's what they do. They're good at writing stuff down, but not nearly as good as like they think they're. They think they're amazing at telling stories, but well, and maybe some of them are, but these stories are like just a nonstop walking, talking contradiction and hypocrisy, right? Yeah. Not exactly the kind. Well, I guess it's kind of along the same lines as like modern Hollywood too, right? The plots suck. Right? Stories usually suck these days. They spend a lot of money on it, right? Try their best to convince you otherwise, but yeah, pretty low level stuff. Smith recently came under fire for comparing vaccinated Albertans to Nazi supporters, right? Listen to this. So she was comparing vaccinated Albertans to Nazi supporters. Don't you mean vaccinated Albertans who were trying to force themselves onto the unvaccinated Albertans? Those people, yes. And in that area, in that aspect, I completely agree with her. But that's not how this is represented, right? No, as if she's just comparing someone that just went and got their vaccine, right? Just by going to get the vaccine as being a Nazi supporter. That's not what she said. That's not what she suggested. And pretending, like, this is what I mean. I mean, you literally got to rely on your readers. This is the thing with the left or these progressives. You have to rely on your readers being fucking dumb as nails, right? Unthinking beasts to write this kind of drivel, right? And want it to stick. Wow. I would feel ashamed to write such nonsense, right? Such blatant nonsense. And expecting that the kind of people that follow me, oh, they'll just fall for a hook, line, and sinker. I got to tell you, I would feel a little weird about doing something like that. But these people, they have no shame, apparently, right? And boycotting Remembrance Day poppies in protest of vaccine rules. It's just unreal. Smith later rationalized her comments, explaining that COVID-19 was a frustrating time for everyone, but she put those dark days behind her when she became premier. But just 2 weeks before becoming premier, Smith appeared on Facebook Live with Vincent Byfield, a social conservative activist, Alberta secessionist, and at the time a top leader of the far-right Take Back Alberta group. Byfield now serves on the UCP's board of directors. So I heard a bunch of insults, right? That's about it. During the September 2022 live stream, Byfield asked Smith pointed questions about police enforcement of public health orders. The Calgary Police Service stated, "Our job is to enforce the laws that our elected governments put in place," Byfield told Smith. With such a mindset, pastors have since been arrested. What will you do to ensure that police and other enforcement officers always act within the principles that first and foremost, they are to protect the citizens? After stressing the importance of political leadership, Smith told Byfield she thinks frontline police officers have been given too much latitude. You have frontline officers using their own judgment call about how to enforce, when to enforce, and how aggressively to enforce. And they made some big mistakes, Smith said, adding, the passengers never should have been arrested. Smith explained that listeners of her now defunct radio show sent her clippings from the criminal code and argued that it was the police, not the people violating Public Health Act, who were guilty of crimes. Yeah. I remember being on the air because it was my last couple of days on the air when Pastor Coates got arrested, and there are many people sending me criminal code sections, Smith recalled. You're not allowed under the criminal code to disrupt the service. That's a criminal code violation, Smith reiterated. I have to wonder whether or not some of those officers are the ones who broke the law in doing so. Well, this is the hilarious part too, right? Like, at the end of the day, laws, and I've said this in past live stream, all laws, for them to be considered anything remotely resembling just, or as the means to implement justice, right? And respect people's sovereignty, their inherent and inalienable rights and freedoms and all that stuff, they have to be based on a code of ethics, on morality. First principle, all the laws, in the absence of being based on, a code of ethics and morality, right, or actual principles, well, they're just edicts, right? Just like with all collectivist or authoritarian regimes in the past, or dictators, right? Everything they write down that they want to do to impose themselves on the minority or the masses, of course they say that's the law, right? There's all kinds of laws in North Korea that you have to follow right now, but I would suggest that the overwhelming majority of them, or a sizable portion of them, are evil and vile and the antithesis of anything that respects individual freedom and liberty, right? So you stop thinking along things based on legislation or laws and start thinking things more along the lines of first principles, of ethics, of morality, because really at the end of the day, that's what matters. Because otherwise, you're just making an argument for, like I say, political edicts, political authoritarianism, arbitrary authoritarianism, and might makes right. And like I said, I would suggest most people don't truly want to live in that kind of a world. The ones that even pretend they do are the ones that maybe at certain particular times are like, oh, I have power. So they love power when they're yielding or wielding that power, right? But do they love it just as much when they're staunch opponents, people that they are in complete disagreement or loathe or hate, assumes that kind of control or authority for themselves? I would say no. Never seen anyone say, yeah, I want my opponent, the people that hate me, I want them to have the kind of power to dictate and control every aspect of my social and economic life. Never heard that from one Canadian or any other human being. So, right? Reality over rhetoric. That's what I always say. So basically, like I say, the big thing for me here, the takeaway for me here anyways, is that Smith is at the very least thinking at things from the individual liberty perspective. And kind of aligning along the lines, her thought process in terms of protecting, right, those fundamental rights and freedoms. So to me, that's kind of important, right? Kind of important. Anyways, let me just bring this one off. I'll make sure to include this in the description of the live stream. I'm going to jump back into the chat here real quick. Oh, I should also state that Kathy Flett used to be part of Wexit Provincial Party before they fell apart. Okay. What I want is people in the government that can speak out against the two. I'm with you. Completely with you there, Saniko. And I wish that were the case. But you're not going to get that. That's the unfortunate part. I wish you could. I really, really wish you could. Right. And I wish the Libertarian Party of Alberta, or anyone that's a libertarian or these independent individuals, or even a small fringe party that's even more staunch supporters and advocates of respect and individual freedom and liberty. I wish that were the case, but You and I are massively outnumbered by statists and collectivists of all stripes, right? Some of them on some occasions we get along with fine, depending on the particular subject matter that we're discussing. But there are other areas where it's not just that we got a slight divide, right? It's that their thought processes, the things they want to impose, are antithetical to sovereignty and then individual liberty. That's the problem, right? It's different if we can just have minor disagreements, right? Or you like the color blue, I like the color red, or some stupid thing like that. That's right. But when people are supporting a party that wants to actively destroy and undermine, you know, the sovereignty and the individual rights and freedoms of individuals, that's not a minor disagreement. That's not a minor grievance. That's profound and has a profound effect on each and every one of our lives. So once again, to me, the biggest thing is, you know, try to keep the collectivist hordes at bay. And if it means voting for Daniel Smith, and I got to tell you, I'm just saying right here now, either she's a really great snake oil salesman, but I got to tell you, she says some great things that gives me a little bit of hope myself when I hear her talking, right? And she seems to have the gumption. That's the other thing. She seems to have the courage of her convictions, which is huge in this modern era. I mean, think about how many people. There's a reason why Jason Kenney, right, get kicked to the curb. You know, a lot of people foolishly or naively believe that just because he might have been good on some areas, like in terms of defending the oil patch per se, but he was more than willing to sell Albertans up a river, right, and throw away their liberties. And rightfully, a lot of Albertans were up in arms, outraged, and kicked that fucker to the curb as a consequence of that. And good for them. Good for them. The misinformation campaign the NDP is blaming is very shameful. Notley is just a floor mat for the federal libs and NDPs, no doubt. Remember the wine ban Notley had with BC? She's a troll. Yeah, right on for mentioning that. Hey, what's going on, Darren Chica 442? Right on. I see that you joined the stream. Really appreciate that, man. And yeah, you make some good point there. I would say malinformation. Yeah. Smith wants to put tax increases on anything to go through a referendum each time. That is golden. Well, that alone, right there, that you would have to hold a referendum, right, to increase taxes on the Albertan people. That alone, folks, that alone. It's just, yeah, huge. That is huge. That, you know, I guess is not the end all be all, but something like that coming to fruition, being, you know, written into law so that no future governments can increase taxes, which is taxation is theft, folks, you know, can increase their ability to plunder your economic prosperity, your income and your wealth. That's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing. That alone would be enough for me. I'm just going to speak for myself, but I got to tell you, if I was an Albertan, I'd be pulling the lever for Daniel Smith, even if it was just for that alone. Now, of course, the rest of the policy would have to at least somewhat line up with respecting my sovereignty and my freedom, of course. And it does kind of seem that way. Now, of course, there are other areas where I disagree with. What is it? She wants to, there's one thing that you want to force like drug people into some kind of rehabilitation. That's a stupid fucking thing. That's not a way to do it. And Daniel Smith should know better. But I suppose, once again, is she trying to appease or appeal to a certain base of like those real staunch social conservatives? No doubt. Right? This is the problem, especially for people that are liberty oriented. When you're the representative of the minority, right, it means you have to constantly try to expand that big tent. And it means you do, to some degree, have to sell your soul or your principles, right? Little bit here, a little bit there to create that big tent. I wish that were not the case, but it is. And pretending otherwise isn't going to help anybody. Hey, what's going on, Curtis Ruska? Really appreciate you joining the stream, Curtis. Long time I've been paying attention to Curtis. We've been following each other on social media platforms for quite a while. Like I say, really appreciate it. You joined the stream there. Morning. And yes, it is morning. Yes, I always got to keep that in mind, that it is morning on the West Coast. And sorry for doing this a little bit early, but I actually have a lot of other things that I got to do there. Going to help my son a little bit later. We're going to do the brakes on his vehicle and stuff, and like I say, get some other obligations that I must attend to before I get back to work tomorrow. But I just figured this is really, really something important. I know I haven't even been doing much in terms of live streams lately, but when it comes to stuff like this, I figured let's just do it, get it out there, you know, regardless of how many people see it. But I just feel compelled that I got to try. And anytime or any chance I get to bring more freedom or help in any way to usher in more freedom for any Canadian, regardless of your jurisdiction or any person around the world for that matter. Freedom's a great thing. Everybody should have it, right? But yeah, if there's any role I can play in any way, shape, or form to help bring that to fruition, like I say, no matter how small in nature it might be, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. Kind of my thing. Hitler's party was called the NDP. NSDAP, I think it was what it was, right? National Socialist Deutsche, whatever. Yeah, National Socialist German Worker Party is what it was. But yeah, when you translate it into German, it's the NSDAP. But yeah, I get you, right? That's not a coincidence. And that's the other thing when people talk about, and you folks have heard me say this before, calling Hitler a right winger. Like, really though? Really? Just everything about that man, and I won't hammer away too much on that stuff, but everything about the man, his history, his past, right? Same with Mussolini. Same with socialists and communists like Mao and Stalin or Lenin, right? Yeah. At least think about it. Progressives and the left these days, they very much align with the same kind of things that these so-called authoritarian right-wingers promoted back in the day, right? So there's that. There's, once again, reality over rhetoric. But yeah, thanks for pointing that out. That's a great point. It's to get criminals who commit crime due to drug habit off the drugs instead of prison. Yeah, no, listen, the whole drug problem thing, that is rough. That's rough. That is rough. And that's the other thing. There is no one size fits all. There isn't one answer that's going to be applicable to everyone that has drug problems. Which really, that's why it shouldn't be a government policy. No, it should be a people policy. People, especially, these people who are drug addicts, right? Living on the streets, going through whatever their trials and tribulations are, they may very well be self-inflicted. And if that's the case, listen, you can try, right? But if you can lead a horse to water, you can't make them drink. You can lead a person to knowledge, you can't make them think. And you could lead a drug addict to, some method of rehabilitation. But if they're unwilling to go, well, listen, that's at some point in time, and it's not heartless. It's just, once again, it's just being a realist. It's just being a realist. Of course, people should be trying, but to me, I'm already highly suspect of people who get to the point in their life where they have not one person in their life that's actively trying to help pull them out of the mess or the quagmire they're in, right? And I get it. There are definitely special incidents or isolated individuals who, maybe they tried the best the whole life. But overwhelming majority of them, I would suggest, they brought that hell upon themselves. Or even if some of that hell was imposed on them at some point in time, we have free will, right? I could have at times in my life, and I started down a slippery slope a couple of times in my life when I was going through terrible times, right? Especially after losing my license and livelihood, right? I started drinking a little more than I typically used to, right? And I could have continued down that path, but I chose to acknowledge and recognize that that's the wrong path to take. I got to do better, which is why I went back the opposite direction. And now I don't even drink. I haven't drank in a couple of years now. Why? Because yes, I have free will. It was not easy. Of course it's difficult. And I've known people who have been terrible drug addicts. My uncle, by my stepfather's brother, so through marriage, but hit one of his sons. If you had said to me 10, 15 years ago, Did that guy ever stand a chance? Well, the young lad that I knew of that 10, 15 years ago, I would have said, no, nope. But once again, he had at least people in his family. And not saying even the people immediately in his family don't have their own issues or didn't have their own past issues to deal with. But once again, they found a way. They obviously cared about each other enough and cared about themselves enough to do better. Right? Some people, like I say, you can try best, whether you want to do it through a top-down measure or try to appeal to their sensibilities or compassionate, whatever excuse or reasoning you're using behind it or justification, you can try. And there's nothing wrong with trying as long as you're not, once again, using force as a means to end, because that's usually, right, preemptively, not going to be conducive for the kind of outcome that you would want or that you would expect. Anyways, let me move on from that. I just want to see, I do got a few more. Mussolini and his wife were hardcore Marxists. Yeah, well, I mean, Mussolini was, he wrote for even his dad, right? Was a huge, and apparently quite popular socialist in Italy. And Mussolini, I believe, wrote for a couple socialist publications for many years, in his life, right? So yes, yeah, oh yeah, me in particular, and I'm sure quite a few people in the chat here watching the stream are quite aware. But yeah, thanks for pointing that out, John. Oh, I forgot about ending public funding drug habits at supposed clean sites. BS. Yeah, well, this is the other thing about public funded drugs. Listen, if people want to voluntarily donate to supply people with, safe areas to do their drug, stop trying to, once again, don't force or impose yourself on others, right? If people are genuinely compassionate, they want to do that, let them step up to the plate and do it themselves. Force as a means to an end, once again, it always comes with so many more negative consequences and ramifications that what little bit of good that you think you're doing, it pales in comparison to all the negative ramifications and consequences that are a result of trying to force things onto people, right? I quit drinking in 94. I was becoming a dick. Hey, I hear you, Curtis, and congrats to you, man, for doing that. That's awesome. Actually, that's a long time. 94. That was the year we had our first or our youngest son. That's the year our youngest son was born. So that's a long time that you've been away from the ball. And congrats to you, Curtis. And that's the thing. So Curtis, just like myself, and just like I'm sure other people in the chat, you recognize, right? You have the self-knowledge, the awareness to recognize that, yeah, maybe things aren't so good doing what I'm doing, right? But once again, you can try your best to help people, but at the end of the day, that decision rests and resides in each and every one of us as an individual. Leading by example, being, compassionate towards others, offering a helping hand when it's appropriate. Those are all good things, but using the state, using government as a means to an end, it always works out to be the exact opposite, and the results are contradictory to what people pretend or claim that they're trying to achieve. I know most teachers and nurses in the unions are all NDP lovers. All good. There are more trades and private sector votes for the UCP, which is awesome. Power to the people. That's the thing with government workers, right? And hashtag not all. But it's unfortunate that people are placed in that position where, because we all know that's the thing. That's the point of keeping government at bay, right? Keeping the big, gigantic proverbial gun in the room, in the holster for the most part, right? Is that, yeah, the minute you give anyone the opportunity to use force as a means to an end, well, we know how that works there. And even ones that don't want to do it preemptively, if they benefit from it, are they going to actively pursue avenues or methods that's going to destroy their ability to benefit from the status quo? Most people won't. That's the thing. That's the thing with libertarians and realists is we just understand human and human nature. It's seemingly much better than most. And we don't live idealistically to think that, if you just do a little flip this switch, pull this lever, manipulate this, change that, and somehow you're just going to magically change human nature, right? Or how humans are incentivized. Good luck with that. I've never seen it happen in real life, right? So this is the thing. So where's the precedent, right? Once again, it's a mystical belief. It is truly a belief system that's grounded in no reality, just pure wishful thinking, because there's no evidence to suggest that has ever worked. But yes, the people who work for government, and I'm sure I'm almost certain that we all have members of our own family who work for government. And they might, in some areas of life, be genuinely decent people. But you find out where that limitation stops. And that's usually when it affects their own bottom line, right? So people can pretend to be virtuous and altruistic and self-sacrificial, right? Benevolent, all that's, they can pretend all they want. But at the end of the day, human beings, how we thrive and survive as a species is we're all about self-preservation at the end of the day. It has to be. And it's one thing that we share in common with everything in the state of nature, without exception, from the lowliest plant and flower or tree to your household pets, to your livestock, to the wild animals out there. Self-preservation is the mechanism that drives each and every one of us. It has to be. It literally has to be. So once you understand that, and libertarians understand that intrinsically, then you have to recognize and realize that, well, you just can't pretend that it's okay to create this entity, this mystical entity that gives people the pretense of authority over others. Because they're going to use that to benefit themselves at the expense of others. That's just going to be a reality. And even the ones who don't want to actively seek out that, if they find out that someone else is going to, so if you're a government worker, you're not a fan of Daniel Smith. If Daniel Smith is out there saying we might have to shrink the public sector, right? To save taxpayer dollars. If you're a public sector worker, you're like, oh, that means they're coming for me, my livelihood, my job, right? My ability to take care of me and my own, right? That's where they're, like I say, pretend to be benevolent and altruistic all you want. But that's where there's, and I wouldn't even suggest it's selfishness per se, right? It's just people are looking to take care of themselves first and foremost. Themselves and those they care about first and foremost. Once again, it's just humanity 101, as much as so many other people want to pretend otherwise, right? That false illusion of altruism, sounds good in theory, but that kind of thing only happens in special one-off isolated incidents where you may be willing to sacrifice yourself, but it's not for everybody. There are very, very select people in the world that every one of us, like for me, there's a few people in my life. I'm not going to name them, right? Because then once you draw that line, it's like, well, what about me? But there are few people in my life that, yeah, I would most definitely make that decision to sacrifice myself for them. But once again, that's a small, very small number amount of people. And that's the way it is for everyone, no matter what they try to suggest or how they try to tell you otherwise. Good man, I quit in 2005. Well, that's awesome, John 23. That is freaking really awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. I've noticed it's a big thing even now, but you folks are way out in front than people like myself. But I've even noticed since the pandemic, there are some people, and it seems to be predominantly those in the liberty-oriented type of communities and stuff that are choosing to quit drinking, throw away some of those vices, right? And I think it's great because people are really bettering themselves at a time when, it's probably a real good time to be doing that. You probably couldn't have picked a better time to try to better yourselves, right? When the rest of the insane madness, the madness of the crowds, when they're headed towards the cliff, it's nice to see that there are a sizable portion of people who are headed in the other direction, trying to do the right thing. I agree that a hard-handed approach is taking addicts off the street against their will is wrongful. However, someone cracked out and stabbing random people is not an option either. intervention. 100%. Oh yeah, if somebody's like actually seeking to actively cause physical harm to someone, listen, I'm all for people, like I say, but that's the thing. That's where you have to distinguish the difference between the drug addict that gets high as fuck, right? Maybe destroying their own lives, just lay somewhere in a gutter or on a sidewalk somewhere. And that's the thing. That's where you got to distinguish the difference between those people who are just massively self-destructive and those who are destructive towards others, right? And seeking to cause harm to others, whether it's economic or physical. Those areas, I'm 100% yes. Defend yourself, protect yourself, and people should. If you know that you live in an area where these people exist, yes, protect yourself and help protect others that you care about, right? But don't rely on the state for that. But then, of course, I understand the argument, but I'm not allowed to defend myself. See, that's the problem, though. That's where the state has fucked up, right? The state has made it so that we aren't even legally allowed to protect ourselves from bad actors in society. That's the issue. But once again, the state is at the heart, is at the core of that problem. So the state's not going to be the answer to that problem, considering that the state is already that problem. We are the offspring of successful predators. It is the only way we survive, and you just can't shut that stuff off. That's true, and not even necessarily predators per se, some for sure, but others who were just wise enough, right? Because the other way to sustain yourself, a predator can sustain themselves, but in the human realm, at least, those who are not predatory in nature, but, and I like the expression that Jordan Peterson uses, but are very dangerous and have the capacity to be predators, but keep that under control. Well, those are another a lot, right? So have the capacity to be predatory in nature due to the whether you're talking about the skills in terms of knowledge, wisdom, physical prowess, right? All that kind of stuff, or whatever tools or things that we have at our disposal. Yes, but once again, you don't necessarily have to be predatory in nature. You just have to have the ability to be, not prey. Right? Because that's the thing. We both have the capacity to one or the other, right? And I myself have never in my life, even when I was a kid, perceived myself as prey for anybody. I'm not to suggest there aren't predators who couldn't overwhelm me, but I've always made it actively known that it's quite dangerous to try to be a predator to me. I'm not going to be easy prey, right? Which is why I would imagine most times if they've moved on to prey that maybe were much less dangerous and much less a threat to them. And that's what it comes down to once again, even predators, as Curtis is pointing out, are all about self-preservation. Be a monster, learn how to control it. Yeah, that's kind of my thing, right? And I learned that years ago, although I love the way Jordan Peterson articulated that. But yes, do not allow yourself to be a sacrificial lamb or prey to anyone, right? Be kind. And I'm kind to everyone I meet until they're not to me. And then they'll see. And then, right, I bare my teeth. It's like, yeah, you're darn right. And that's the way it has to be, right? If you don't want to be taken advantage of, at the very least. Anyways, like I say, I really appreciate all you folks in joining the live stream. And as I mentioned before, I acknowledge early on that this live stream is taking place a little bit early on the West Coast, and I apologize that you folks, but I really happy that I've had some of you folks join the live stream. And like I say, I don't know what else to tell the Albertan people or for anyone that would take the time to watch this video. But this seems like a good time to, like I say, and like it's almost leaving a bad taste in my mouth to even suggest, because it's not an easy thing for a libertarian like myself to suggest. But if voting for Daniel Smith and the UCP can, like I say, bare minimum, keep the collectivist hordes that align with the socialist NDP at bay, at least for the interim, for the time being, give us a little bit of time, a little reprieve. I mean, think about it, folks. We've been under a lot of tyrannical stress and tactics and divisive narratives. And I mean, the Emergency Act. I mean, come on, people who are even remotely or tacitly supporters of freedom and liberty need a little reprieve. Need a little reprieve. And like I say, I don't know how you're going to be able to sleep at night if the Notley NDP get in power in Alberta. I think that could be massively, massively detrimental. So this is an area where it's like, once again, yeah. And for the people say, "Oh, Bennett's selling his principle." Hey, look, say whatever you want. Words, they just slide on. I know who I am, and I'm confident enough in the kind of things that I stand for. But yeah, probably be really wise to make sure you're keeping those authoritarian collectivist hordes, those NDP supporters, right? Who pretend, right? That's the thing, pretend that that they care about the little people. Well, they were given a chance to prove that. And what did they do? They showed with absolute clarity when they had their term in power that nope, they wasted no time, right? Going and targeting the blue collar types, the hardworking working class in the oil and gas industry in Alberta, and anyone, once again, that weren't willing to align with this kind of top down conformist authoritarian collectivism, right? Of turning humans into sacrificial beasts, right? Nope. Don't do it. Don't do it. Once again, and the fact that Daniel Smith is completely against lockdowns, right? Because that's the thing. Sure, the COVID lockdowns may be in the past, although they're not a distant memory for me. They're still fresh. They're still fresh. The wounds have not healed, and neither should they, or nor should they be forgotten. But the fact that she was a staunch advocate of liberty, of individual liberty, and willing to stand up against, these kind of top-down draconian measures, these lockdowns. Well, climate change is still out there, folks. Who's to suggest that the NDP Notleys, who's to suggest there might not be some area where not just the Rachel Notley, the NDPs, but other jurisdictions around the world get that notion once again that they're going to go full tyrannical on the people to what? To protect the environment, or at least that's the auspices or the guise or the excuse that they'll use. And like I say, at the very least, that you'll be able to sleep at least at night knowing that Daniel Smith or the UCP under the leadership of Daniel Smith will never go that route. So there's that. And that too is a big, big deal as far as I'm concerned. True that, brother. Anyways, folks, I wasn't planning on keeping this live stream going on too long. Like I say, I know it's quite early out west, but I did want to at least cover this topic. And like I say, I wish the people of Alberta all the best, or at least the good people of Alberta. Not everyone, because yeah, there's some Albertans out there are actively seeking to cause harm to their fellow citizens, right? And to constantly impose themselves, their will, their ideology, their ideas, their preferences onto others. And for those people, yeah, no fan, no or friend to them. But the ones who do have that live, let live mentality, who do have some semblance of respect for individual sovereignty and freedom, right? For all of you people, and I'm sure that represents a sizable majority of the people of Alberta. Yeah, do what needs to be done. Vote for Daniel Smith. Make sure that, like I say, the liberties that you do have, that you still retain, can be maintained for at least for the interim until things are figured out, and maybe we're not just playing defensive, but can possibly go on the offensive someday. Just read a couple more comments here. I want Smith to start on the road to separate, bring it all back to Alberta, update our education system. Well, that's another possible thing, right? Is sovereignty, right? Having a sovereign state. That's a beautiful thing, so that we're not all forced into these collectives and these forced associative units, right? that's the one beautiful thing I'll say about the United States. At least there's a couple jurisdictions or a few jurisdictions in the US where if you're more freedom or liberty oriented, you can gravitate towards those people and be among other like-minded individuals, right? And Alberta, at the very least, I mean, come on, it's just one province. So yeah, and it's just like with New Hampshire or a place like Florida, maybe, right? Well, Alberta's at the very least, in comparison, contrast to a lot of the other provinces in this country, at least closer right now as it is, due to not having sales tax and much lower taxes and more economic freedoms. They're much more closer to, what libertarians or people who care about their freedom and their liberty would idealize it as a place that they want to live and reside, right, and thrive in. So yeah, at least give that jurisdiction. And for those of us on the East Coast, right, well, New Brunswick is another place where at the very least you have that option, right? So for the West Coast, you got Alberta. For the East Coast, you got New Brunswick. Could we not have at least two jurisdictions in this country where the people on either side of that divide of this big giant landmass where we can congregate to, find areas of similar interests and respect for each other in terms of our sovereignty, our freedoms, and our rights? I think that's, at the very least, that would be a great step forward for Canadians of all stripes, of all backgrounds, and preferences. Anyways, like I say, I'm really thankful for you folks. Let me just see here. I saw Smith a few months ago. I asked, how does she feel about separating? She just winked at me. Right on. Right on. NDP are losing their strongholds in Calgary and Edmonton. Well, that's going to be the big thing, right? The big cities, right? Those urban centers will be, because that's where you find your progressives typically, right? So anyways, like I say, I'm wishing the Alberta people all the best. Hopefully you will achieve and attain some semblance of freedom, or at least a little bit more, or maybe a little peace of mind, right? Even a little peace of mind going forward after Monday night's results. I'm hoping for the best, right? And maybe I'll have a live stream maybe next weekend to talk about how things unfolded, right? Anyways, to the fine folks of Alberta and to the rest of the fine folks in Canada in general, I wish y'all a great rest of your day here on Sunday. And like I say, hopefully this country will start, whether it's just in one area, one jurisdiction somewhere, hopefully somewhere we'll start gravitating towards more respect for sovereignty and freedom, so that we'll give those of us who align with that at least some place of reprieve, right? That's what needed and necessary. But thanks for all you folks that join the live stream. Thanks for anyone that will watch it subsequent. If you wouldn't mind, just take a few seconds of your time, and if you haven't subscribed already, if you're watching this on YouTube, give me a like and subscribe. Maybe share with others, and same if you're watching on Rumble, Odyssey, and I believe it's even going up on Twitter too. And I see Ben White. I see you there, Ben White. Thank you, Ben. Really nice to see you in the chat too. And enjoy your day. And like I say, everyone else, have a good one. Have a good week. It's Canadian Libertarian. I love liberty.